Welcome to your in-depth weekly astrology overview and zodiac forecast for week commencing the 17th of February. I'm going to share some standout details to begin with, then on screen the event chart right at the start of the week that always provides an important backdrop for the whole 7 days. As influences feed in, I'll go through those frame by frame to give you a really clear picture of what we can all collectively expect for this week. I'm then going to go through each of the 12 zodiac signs from Aries through to Pisces. I'm astrologer Patrick Arundell. Thank you so much for joining me. Your views and interactions are truly appreciated. If you've yet to subscribe, please help the channel to thrive by doing so and also clicking the bell notification symbol. If you have a comment, please share. This is very much a community. My new website, patrickarundell.com, is now live. It is a work in progress, but please join me. Through to the end of February, you can get my reports package half price as a special celebratory offer. Also, I've now launched my video readings. If you'd like to have 2 questions answered, your solar return if your birthday is upcoming, or your year overview looked at, please see the links below for more, or check out my testimonials for my one-to-ones. Now, as this week begins, the sun is preparing to leave the sign of Aquarius, and it's going to move into Pisces on Tuesday. But what makes this so important in terms of a Pisces season is the role of the North Node, which returned the true North Node to the sign of Pisces on the 11th of January. So as the sun enters the sign this year, the North Node is closely aligned to the position of Neptune, one of the 2 rulers of the sign of Pisces. So this is a very symbolic time for Pisces energy. Now, there is going to be some challenges this week with a quarter moon and also Mercury in Pisces squaring up to the traditional ruler of the sign of Pisces, Jupiter. But I'm going to tell you about some sensational news concerning Jupiter, so please stay with me for that. And also Venus, the lesser benefit, starts this week off in great form too. So on the screen now, I'm sharing the event chart right at the start of the week. And you can see the sun is on the anaretic point in the sign of Aquarius. But the moon is aligning to the sun a little bit broadly, but they're in a good relationship, and the moon starts this week off in the sign of Balance, Libra, asking us in some ways to find some equilibrium. But let's think about the role of Venus, the ruler of the sign of Libra, because you can see at 7:54, nearly 8 degrees, it's in a fantastic link with the part of fortune itself, pretty close to Pluto. The part of fortune in Aquarius suggests by connecting or at least working collaboratively with people, there's a lot to be gained. Now, if you are someone who's very creative, a crafter, an artist, a musician, some kind of association could prove to be very helpful this week, because the sign of Pisces is very much about expression of our emotion. Now, Saturn has been there over the last couple of years and has been a mischief maker with Jupiter since last July, but the square between them is stretching out at this time, which is something to appreciate. But Saturn's actually in a very solid link with Mars still. Mars in the water sign of Cancer, in retrograde, in full, but the structural energies of Saturn linked to the instincts of Pisces and Mars' desire to get things done could mean that a plan we've wanted to execute around a home change or improvement or home office or some redecoration may be something that they give us just that nice balance of the plan and the motivation to see it through. But as this week begins, Venus is going to speed up and head towards a fabulous sextile to Jupiter. Now, they don't actually come into an exact relationship of 60 degrees, but they're close enough by the end of this week, and it really starts to build up by Tuesday, suggesting that some genuine good fortune and serendipity is possible. But particularly because Venus in Aries is very much about taking the initiative, Jupiter in Gemini, now direct, is about the conversation. It can also be about expressing our ideas and in perhaps a generous but certainly self-confident way. So I definitely like those influences too. But by Tuesday, the Sun pitches up into Pisces. So it's Pisces season full on, particularly with Mercury in that sign now too. But of course, Mercury is detrimented in Pisces. And by Thursday, itself goes into a right angle with Jupiter. Despite the fact that there could be some positive conversations, developments and collaborations, watch out for anyone who doesn't necessarily have your best interests at heart, because also on Thursday there's a quarter moon in Sagittarius. So we have a T-square, if we like, from the position of the Sun to the position of the moon in Sagittarius, but the position of Mercury back to the other side of the heavens to Jupiter in Gemini. So talk can be cheap with that quarter moon, or something that activates our sensitivities could take on a life force of its own. I wouldn't be sharing any confidential information with anyone you don't know very well. And also, if you are feeling a bit vulnerable, a bit sensitive, this is not necessarily the time to be too trusting of anyone you're not so familiar with as well. But a little bit of gossip is possible. But the bigger symbolism of this week, particularly with the North Node in such a tight alliance with Neptune, is to allow ourselves to be guided by our senses. We live in a world where science has become hugely popular, but it has become a little bit of a brutal slugfest between those people who think that everything has to be proved and those people who actually know that some things are led by our instincts. So if there is something this week that you feel strongly about, don't ignore that sixth sense. That's really, really important. But as the week draws to a close, that link between Venus and Jupiter, particularly if there is someone you do feel that you can connect with, there is a simpatico between you, you have shared values, or there's a big project that you're excited about, or is it someone that you're going to be romantically connected to, but whatever you're trying to achieve, whether it's artistic, creative, something to do with a professional or commercial project, do be guided by your instincts, because the sign of Pisces is a very wise sign. It's the last sign of the zodiac. All that accumulative knowledge and experience is there, particularly with Saturn at home at the present time. Saturn gets a bad rap, but Saturn is about wisdom, and we need to listen to the experiences we've had in the past or be guided by those inner gut feelings. Please stay with me as I go through each of the 12 signs from Aries through to Pisces. If you've yet to watch your February deep dive forecast, please see the link below for more. And also, some people ask me, what do I watch, my ascendant, sun or the moon? If you're someone who's very familiar with your personal chart, but particularly the house overlay degrees, definitely the ascendant. But aficionados of astrology will often watch their ascendant and their sun because they know they can get a different perspective. And I actually can really relate to that myself. But if you are emerging into astrology and you're less sure, the sun's always the heartbeat of our situation. But if you do want to understand something from a more emotional or family perspective, then the moon can be interesting too. Here goes, first of all, so Aries, your ruler Mars, continues to retreat, and it's going to do so through to the 24th of this month. But this week, Mars is actually forging that very constructive angle with Saturn. And it's possible that past knowledge or a job that you once did can actually feed into what influences you now, but in a very constructive way. I like to think that life's a little bit like a series of bridges. We go from one situation which may be quite long lasting, sometimes shorter lasting, but then we go across a bridge into a new experience. But when we look back, the series of bridges we cross help us to inform our choices in the here and now. And that's really what Pisces energy can be very much about for you. It could be a time to retreat, to withdraw somewhat, to have some moments of reflection, certainly a very healing time. If you are someone who would like to get away to a retreat, enjoy a spa day, perhaps indulge yourself in a holistic treatment, or just go for a walk in nature by a river or a lake or by the sea. That in itself can be very enhancing. But I think there could be something that you are thinking about that is future orientated, that is really exciting you. And that could come from that creative or also desire-led energy of Venus. And Venus, linking so constructively to Jupiter, suggests that you could have some significant conversations. But don't be surprised also if you find yourself doing some market research this week, taking soundings. Someone could even be in touch on a confidential basis, or perhaps you're going to put your name down with a job agency but not necessarily tell an existing employer. I think it's always important to have our options open, to not be too sealed into a situation. But if you do find yourself feeling a little quieter, a little lower in vitality, or a little more sensitive, it wouldn't be a complete surprise. But I think that energy between your ruler Mars and Saturn just suggests that even if you are running in a low gear at the moment and at low revs, that doesn't mean to say that you're not permeating things that can prove to be very exciting for you and are going to explode into life once you get round to the spring equinox, the vernal point, and the start of the new astrological year. The sun sweeps into your sign. And don't forget, there's an incredibly powerful solar eclipse, the last in a series, in your sign on the 29th of March to look forwards to. So if you find yourself doing lots of prep, it's all in preparation for a very exciting spring ahead. So Taurus, your week commencing the 17th of February forecast sees an exciting amount of action in the most social and interactive part of your chart. The collective that's been in Aquarius recently has really asked some serious questions about your work or role in life, your goals and ambitions. You now get an opportunity to be a little bit more liberated, to perhaps actually go beyond the more tangible world and think about the things that actually inspire you. Now that could be interests, hobbies, friendships, sports teams, anything that really excites and piques your sense of passion. And it's a great opportunity over the next month through Pisces season to bring an extra ignition to your interaction with others. But all this happens with Venus in a very quiet and reflective part of your chart, and of course your ruling planet. So I don't necessarily feel it's a case of quantity as much as quality. Venus has been asking you to be much more conscious of who may be really invested in you in a much more sincere way. And that continues to be a theme in your situation. But Jupiter in your second house, being linked to Venus, your ruler, particularly in the second half of this week, suggests that something from your past, whether it's an old plan that suddenly comes to life again, whether it's just hard work you've invested over a long time, maybe it's some information that you unearth. Someone could even give you a tip, but some kind of good financial fortune could come your way as this week draws to a close. But that potential to get together with others is tested in some ways by the quarter moon on Thursday, because that's in the part of your situation to do with ownership and devotion. And if there is someone in your network who tends to have very high expectations in terms of how much time you should spend with them, that could be something with that quarter moon that you resist. So at the moment, I feel that there's a part of you that may want to be a little more fluid, meet some new people, explore some possible new interests, because bringing that energy in is going to be very invigorating for you. But if you are trying to start again after what has been a separation around a friendship or a love relationship, even more reason to be perhaps a little bit more discriminating in who you spend time with. And I feel this is where the North Node and Neptune can be such an asset to you, because they're really asking you to tune into how things feel. And that is going to be a really valuable asset to you this week. But essentially, if you are wanting to step up your connection to others, you've had a quiet first 6 weeks to the year, this can be an opportunity to revive, get together with people, have some meetups and have some fun. And why not indeed? So Gemini, your week commencing the 17th of February forecast suggests that something you've been patiently and persistently working towards over the last couple of years can suddenly speed up and accelerate in a really exciting way, particularly around a golden prize or ambition that's meant so much to you. This is because on Tuesday the Sun reaches the apex of your chart, the most visible part of its journey, and that's going to give you a much greater confidence, but also give you an extra layer of visibility. Somehow or another, people are going to be much more conscious of the qualities that you have, not least that Mercury is in this area too. But also this week, Venus, the relator, in your sector of alliances and your network, is linking impressively with Jupiter, the planet of fortune, in your sign. Now, to be honest, Jupiter visits around about every 12 years to each zodiac sign, but you haven't had the best of it because Jupiter has been afflicted since around about last July by the more restraining energies of Saturn, which in your sector of success has been asking some very tough questions over the last 24 months. The great news is that connection between the two is weakened this week, but Jupiter links to Venus. So the two planets of fortune are on great terms. It could be a case of who, as much as what you know, but the extra confidence and thrust that you're going to have this week is really going to be an asset, not least that Mars, the planet of desire, may be in its retrograde, may be in a sign that it's in its fall, but its angle to Saturn reduces some of the resistance of Saturn and introduces more energy and more desire into the mix. Now, the quarter moon at the heart of this week suggests that if you really want to impress someone, particularly in a big organisation, you may need to be very conscious of what they want from you rather than expecting them to totally get what you've got to offer. And also at the heart of the week, your ruler Mercury squares up with Jupiter. But that's one of those squares that can be lucky in the sense that it can give us that extra shove to open up and articulate what we have to offer and perhaps be a little bit more risk-taking around the conversations we have. But I feel that link between Venus and Jupiter that does tighten up towards the end of this week is really very, very important. But at the end of the day, in order to seize that prize, you have to have a clear picture of what it is you want. And everyone has different goals that drive them on. And if you are really clear about what yours are, and you've been working very diligently, practicing, refining what you've got to offer, particularly if you work in a professional situation or you're an entrepreneur trying to snag a big client, that drive and determination and grit that Saturn's been testing over the last couple of years can now reach a biting point, and you can see just how far you've come. So on the whole, I would say that this can be an extremely positive week for you, But do remember, Gemini, as much as you can be as quick-witted as anyone, with the shimmering alliance between Neptune and the North Node, sometimes in life we do need to listen to our instincts too, and this week is definitely one of those times. So Cancer, your week commencing the 17th of February forecast is truly scintillating and exciting. If we go back to 2011, when Neptune first arrived in your sister water sign of Pisces, and from 212 full time, that gave you an enchanting appreciation of expanding your horizons of travel, higher education, the spiritual and healing dimensions, which Pisces are very much about. It's probably been a very, very powerful time since then, but over the last couple of years, Saturn, the planet of structures but also of limitations, may have slowed that process down. In fact, you may have felt a lot of headwinds and resistance, which may have felt somewhat frustrating. But at the present time and at the start of this week, Mars may be in retrograde in your sign. It may not be its favourite sign to be in, but it is the planet of desire and thrust. And its link to Saturn this week is just mitigating some of that resistance that Saturn can create. So that's really helpful to you as you come into this week. But the bigger picture is the arrival of the Sun, the presence of Mercury, but even more so of the North Node. The North Node goes through a big journey of about 18.7 years. So it's back in the sign of Pisces, again, after around about 17 years. And that's a very evocative influence for you, particularly as it's shimmering all through this week with Neptune. If you want to engage your imagination, to set your intentions to your heart's desires, to trip the light fantastic, you've got an opportunity to achieve whatever it is you want, even if it is escaping from something which isn't working for you, whether it's a dull job, whether it's a relationship that's not very respectful, whether it's an interest that's lost its luster. Whatever you want to remove yourself from, the potential to become more independent is really strengthened by the role of the Sun. So over the next month, you could find yourself wanting to jet off somewhere, be much more spontaneous, perhaps take a day off and just do exactly what your whim tells you you should do. The problem, however, is that on Thursday of this week, the moon's in the part of your chart to do with obligations, responsibilities and chores. And if you do find it difficult to create that space for yourself, a sense of resentment, frustration and even irritation could crop up. On the same day, Jupiter, the planet which is very much about the spiritual dimension, in your 12th house, is actually also squaring up with Mercury in your 9th house. If there is something that isn't quite settling on your senses in a way you would like, you could find your mind thinking about it and finding it very difficult to disengage from anything that you don't feel is particularly fair, because the 9th house can in some ways be about natural justice, and that may be what you're yearning for. But just know that Venus is in your sector of leadership, and your sector of leadership is going to be blessed in a very dynamic way, particularly towards the end of March, with a stunning solar eclipse. Neptune moving into Aries for the first time in about 163 years for just under 8 months. But also later on in May, Saturn will move into your 10th house as well. So a lot of opportunity to raise your profile and your status and also your authority is going to come later this year. But what you get a chance to do now is inform yourself better. So there could be some training, higher education, strands in your situation, or you may just want to have some pure freedom and escapism. And however you choose to do that, if you can make it come to pass this week, I think it will be very good for your soul. But whatever you are talking to people about, perhaps an idea that you find to be really exciting, and perhaps for now it is a private conversation, that is going to come into the open much more as the spring months go on. So Leo, your week commencing the 17th of February forecast sees your ruler on the move. Yes, the sun moves on Tuesday into the 8th house. The 8th house is quite complex. It can be where we're most invested, most devoted, most committed. It can be where we're thinking about long-term financial planning, investments, trusts, inheritances, pensions and so forth. But by the middle of this week with the quarter moon, there is a bit of a challenge because the quarter moon in your sister fire sign of Sagittarius makes you aware of what you desire. And if you're in a situation where you're giving it everything, but you're trying to collaborate with someone who's not, that quarter moon can certainly flag up the difference between you. Also on the same day, Mercury and Jupiter square up. Now Mercury, like the sun in your 8th house, and Saturn, the node, and also Neptune, it's quite the mix, you know. And if there is something you've been considering around a relationship and you're unsure about what to do, this can be a very transformational week, but it may be a week that you do have to confront some elements that aren't working so well. So the quarter moon, one of the elements could be some kind of control that's existing around your situation. If it's coming from another person, that's much more difficult to deal with. But if it's something to do with what you're doing because a situation doesn't feel right, try to reassess why that fearful response may be what you're falling back on. Because Venus, the planet of relating, is actually in a fantastic part of your chart to understand the higher truths of any situation, whether it's financial or to do with a relationship. But it's pushing you to be brave. It actually forges a stunning link to Jupiter by the end of this week, which suggests that if there is someone you're collaborating with where there isn't these politics, there isn't this sense of jealousy or manipulation, that particular opportunity could be absolutely fantastic for you. But if there's something else that just seems to be a lot of give and not a lot of get, then there may be some big questions that you will need to ask over the following weeks. And one of the things that's been provoking that for some while, Leo, to be honest, even since the start of September, is the role of Mars. And from the 6th of January back into your 12th house, but in retrograde through to the 24th of this month. Now Mars may be forging a very positive link to Saturn this week. And if you are falling back on past experiences or connections around a professional situation, and there is someone that you have a lot of respect for because you know that they're very reliable, that may be something to do with where you're connected that could work well this week. In fact, if your devotion and commitment is being entirely reciprocated, this can be a beautiful time of the year when you really understand that something has a depth to it that's quite special. But it needs to feel equal. Not necessarily both parties adding exactly the same ingredients to the mix, but just doing their best. So if there is a gap in doing the best in a situation that you're giving it everything around, that can be what leaves you feeling somewhat bereft this week. And then that asks you to think very, very deeply about what may need to make way in your situation, what may need to evolve, and what you may need to let go of in order to grow. So Virgo, your week commencing the 17th of February forecast is packed full of opportunities. Not least, the sun joins up with your ruler Mercury on Tuesday for 1 month. That gives you a fantastic opportunity to connect effectively with others. Mercury in the 7th house is very much about keeping the lines of communication open. Now Mars has been in its retrograde. That is going to come to a close as this week ends, but it forges a very constructive link to Saturn, like the Sun and Mercury, in your sector of relating. But Mars is in the part of your chart to do with your future hopes. It can also be to do with your aspirations, your leadership skills. So I feel that people are going to be very clear about where you stand on situations this week, and that clarity can improve an understanding, whether it's at work, in a personal situation, in the family, because people will know that what you say is exactly what you mean. Yes? Well, perhaps because on Thursday there is a quarter moon. Someone around you with the moon in Sagittarius could seem a bit moody, out of sorts, not quite tuned into how fair and how much you're leaning into their situation that you are. Also on the same day, your ruler Mercury squares off to Jupiter in your sector of success. But you know, something could get discussed on Thursday, which gives you a sense of hopefulness. Mercury square Jupiter is one of those aspects which definitely has an upside. And I feel that over the last couple of years, Saturn has brought some wearying encounters into your situation. It's possible that if you work in a competitive environment or perhaps in a partnership situation, there has been some challenges. You've probably learnt a great deal, however, about what other people expect, but also you've learnt about how you can let them know about what you expect. But the great news about having the Sun in the 7th house, as well as your ruler Mercury, is you can add a little bit of honey to the mix. And of course, because Pluto has moved into that part of your chart, which is asking you to evolve the way you work, the way you live, your core structures, that can all be part of your dialogue. But the link between Venus and Jupiter, as this week draws to a close, could definitely see a very important and helpful financial development which can really please you. Do know the 7th house can be about contracts. It can be about where we reach that interface with others, where we mutually respect each other's positions. It doesn't necessarily have to be romantic relationships. It can be where we can assert ourselves, but also with Mercury in your 7th house, sharpen up our listening skills. But that link between Venus and Jupiter, the two planets of fortune, sees Venus in your sector of longer term business finance, but also where you can be most devoted in a romantic situation, and Jupiter, now travelling forwards, is in your sector of success. So the two planets of fortune are collaborating really splendidly as this week draws to a close. So Libra, your week commencing the 17th of February forecast does have a slice of reality threaded through it. The Sun moving into your 6th house of practicalities is very much about life structure. The details can be to do with routines, but it also can be a part of our situations where we can grapple with making some improvements. Mercury's there as well, so that's asking you to think about how you can do that. But Saturn has at times probably made the last couple of years a bit wearisome because of the amount of expectations, responsibilities or obligations you've got. But now you can turn that to a positive strand. It's all about trying to rejuvenate yourself. And sometimes just taking a step back and observing how we get caught up in the minutiae of life is a very good thing to do. And this is where your talent for balance is definitely going to come in. But if you have got a little bit into a rut, whether it's with your work or what you eat, what time you go to bed, having that review could be really very positive indeed. But this is a week when you can continue to use your natural authority in a very constructive way. So if you're wanting to apply for a job, Mars coming to the end of its retrograde period, angling so well to Saturn, suggests if you do need to have a meeting, you can assert yourself with conviction, but also clarity. but there's a really playful, delightful link between Venus, your ruler, in your sector of relating, and also Jupiter, which is reaching towards not quite an exact sextile towards the end of this week. But if there is someone that you're enjoying collaborating with, there could be a real stroke of fortune threaded into this situation. What's not to like? Well, it's just that Mercury squares up with Jupiter on Thursday, so it's important to be realistic. But also the Sun squares up to the Moon in your third house. And one of the things you shouldn't do this week is actually try to be too virtuous. Even if you're making some changes, reforming certain parts of your situation, do create a list and prioritize what's really important, but don't overburden yourself. That could create a little bit of excess stress. And by the end of this week, even if you are trying to do some things which perhaps clean up your act in some way or another, it's no bad thing to actually have some kind of playful or sociable encounter to balance off the stuff that you're doing to get things a little bit more in order. Scorpio, your week commencing the 17th of February forecast really sees a delightful shift in energy, which comes from the Sun's arrival in the sign of Pisces. If you've been working on a hobby at home recently, or crafting or something artistic, this gives you extra energy to showcase your talents in a more confident and charismatic way. But there's another complex dimension that I feel that you've been grappling with. Your traditional ruler Mars has been retracing its steps since the 6th of January in the part of your situation to do with being independent and travel. And yet, more recently, the Sun and Mercury had aligned along with your modern ruler Pluto in your 4th house, very much to do with where you live, how you live there, and who with, but also understanding your inner world. And because Pluto is going to be in that area for a long time to come, it is going to be something that will be a big theme. But now, despite those paradoxes, I feel that you're going to feel more playful and interactive. If it is a while since you've had an opportunity to get out and about, your appetite to do that can definitely be increased. Now, Saturn, the planet of limitation, has also been asking some serious questions about your love life over the last couple of years, or if you've got talents, asking you to work very hard at them. But ironically, Saturn forges a very solid link to Mars this week. If you are wanting to tell anyone about your talents, you can do so in a very constructive and well thought out way. But it's the warmth of your being that really radiates out much more strongly this week. But there is a quarter moon on Thursday, and that second house energy squaring up with the Sun can, a 5th second house quarter moon, see us tempted to be a bit more impulsive with our resources, particularly if we're getting something that gives us some kind of treat or uplift. But there could also be someone close to you, like an offspring, who wants some kind of financial help. Now, if that has become something of a regular feature, you may need to remind them that their issues are their problem. And maybe it has become a little bit too much of a habit to ask you to bail them out. But also on the same day, Mercury in your 5th house is in a right angle with Jupiter, and that too, particularly around a longer term financial situation, could tempt you to do something different and be a bit more impulsive. Ironically, Jupiter is blessed by the wonderful energy of Venus as this week draws to a close. And if you are doing something that is creative but also has some kind of practical dimension that helps people, that could be a way that you do tease some more out of your income. It's also possible that in terms of your longer term resources, having a discussion with someone who has a different perspective but has your best interests at heart could also reveal some extra value too. Sagittarius, your week commencing the 17th of February forecast is going to see your ruler Jupiter right at the heart of the action, but also there's a quarter moon in your sign on Thursday too. But the week begins with Mars, the planet of passion, in a very constructive angle to Saturn in your fourth house. Now, Saturn in the fourth house has hardly been a box of fun over the last couple of years. You may have had some property issues to deal with, such as a lease not being renewed, perhaps some repairs to a property. There may have been someone you've needed to support who's older or younger, or perhaps your own emotional world has just closed in at times. But there's something practical you can do with the thrust of Mars and the systematic approach of Saturn, which can see you address some of these issues, particularly if it is to do with exactly where or how to live. But some of the emotional dimension can be lifted in a way by the sun's arrival on Tuesday. That's asking you to be more accepting of some of the things that Saturn has perhaps been asking questions around. That's not to say that you should submit to them, but in some ways Saturn has been asking you to become much more conscious of the need to feel things. Being a Sagittarius, very often your response is to dust yourself down when things don't go quite right and go again in some kind of new or dynamic way, which is absolutely brilliant and laudable. But as I've often said, I feel that that leads to you developing a series of bits and pieces of emotions which aren't really resolved. So the sun gives you a great chance to think about all this over the next 4 weeks. Mercury, of course, already in the fourth house, having moved last week, that's also going to be influential this week. But just be aware the quarter moon on Thursday in your sign does suggest that it's important to understand that sometimes if we want to go for a particular plan, it's not always in our best emotional interest. So if there is something you're considering at the moment, try to weigh up how it feels, not just the immediate target. But on the same day, Jupiter and Mercury are in a square. Now this is an interesting one. If you are discussing something with someone that you get on well with, your enthusiasm, often legendary, can certainly be turned up to max. But it is important to hear what they're saying too, and not be too dismissive of any objections they've got. More delightfully this week, Sagittarius, Venus sparkling in your fifth house is potentially very charismatic, but also very social. But if you did socialise, or if there is someone you're really drawn to, if you do go out with them, the chances are you'll want to go on a quiet date or somewhere you're very familiar with. You may even want to cook someone a meal. But by the end of this week, despite the fact that the gathering of energy in Pisces is more homely, the sparkling alliance between Venus and Jupiter and the two planets of fortune is so fantastic. There could be a really key moment, particularly in a relationship, but particularly in a relationship where you feel the other person is emotionally available and supportive to you. So Capricorn, your week commencing the 17th of February forecast sees the accent switch from the foundations of life, anything to do with your values, self-worth and money, much more to the exchange of ideas. But that's an area where your ruler Saturn has been truly dominant over the last 2 years. Ironically, just as the sun moves into this area, chasing Mercury, the planet of communication, Saturn is in a very strong alignment with Mars in your opposite sign. So if ever there was a week to say what you mean and mean what you say, it's this week. Because if you have found that some people have been a little bit resistant to your ideas, or a little standoffish, or even judgmental about some of your beliefs and ideas, over the last 24 months. Now you can just feel that you're much more engaged with others, but it's not necessarily going to be a clear run. The quarter moon, which occurs on Thursday, suggests that there could be someone around you who's still inclined perhaps not to have that engaged discussion with you and may not be quite as honest and upfront as you would like. So if there is something that you're thinking about or discussing that may be of a little bit more of a sensitive or perhaps confidential nature, I wouldn't be too sure that the other side has got your best interests at heart. So it's still important to be a little bit selective about who you're speaking to, not least that Mercury in Pisces can be a little bit of a muddled position for a planet which really likes precision and clarity, and also does square up with Jupiter, the planet of abundance, also on Thursday as well. So you could have a conversation with someone where it all seems hunky-dory. There's a shared uplift on either side, but just do watch a little bit, try to read between the lines. But in general, I just feel that if you have been feeling a great sense of frustration that things are going incredibly slow, they can speed up this week. Now Venus continues in the part of your chart making you mindful potentially of home changes, decoration, or if you are attracted to someone romantically, it may be someone you know through your family, you've known a long time, or you have some kind of emotional connection to. But Venus and Jupiter actually have a very fortunate alliance as this week draws to a close. And whether you're decluttering stuff at home or you realise that an old heirloom is much more valuable than you first thought, or perhaps you can be a little bit more canny around marshalling your resources, some information you find out this week can actually be of great help and could prove fortunate too. But in general, the flow of interaction with others will improve. And if there is one person who has been causing some issues recently, as Mars reaches the end of its long retrograde through your opposite sign, which began on January the 6th, by the very end of this week, I feel that they will know in no uncertain terms exactly what your boundaries are. So Aquarius, your week commencing the 17th of February forecast gives you an opportunity to measure your progress. This could be in a tangible way in terms of life foundations. It may be about finance. It could be about a creative plan or a life change that's been evolving over the last couple of years, ever since Pluto moved for 11 weeks from the end of March 2023, and then again from the 21st of January in 2024, and then again from the 19th of November 2024 right through to now. A big shift may be going on in your world, particularly if you're born or have planets right at the start of Aquarius. And then recently, topping up that, you've had the activity of the Sun, but also Mercury, accenting your individuality, your thrust, your ideas, your creativity and charisma. Also a gorgeous new moon which occurred on the 29th of January. So a lot has given you traction, but what's the outcome? And that's what you're about to discover, because over the last couple of years, as much as Pluto has started to evolve and help you to move forwards towards your future, there may be something from your past that Saturn has been deprecating in some ways. It could have been an old source of income, or perhaps your values have shifted, or maybe you've just found your connection to others stifled in some way. There's been a sense of inhibition. Well, what you have now as the Sun moves into Pisces, catching up with Mercury, but also with Saturn, and in a more spiritual way, Neptune and the North Node, is the chance to see how all the things you've been instigating, or if you've been adding extra verve to an ongoing strand, how that will all shape up. And interestingly, your traditional ruler Saturn, which may have been quite the bugbear over the last 2 years, can come back to you in a significant way. Because since the 6th of January 2025, Mars, the planet of drive, passion and assertion, has been in your 6th house, which can be good to be very active and very busy in terms of practicalities, but it has been in a retrograde. So there may have been frustrations, particularly around your work, perhaps even exasperations, but something now, particularly by the very end of this week, can just seem to break through, and that can be like a dam bursting. But it's going to be a burst dam that has got the potential to become something else that's longer lasting. The structural energy of Saturn linking with the thrust of Mars is going to be very helpful, especially as Mars goes direct on the 24th of February, the Monday following this one, based on universal. But also this week there is a quarter moon, and it's a quarter moon in the part of your chart to do with friendships. And if there are certain people in your world who you do feel are somewhat of a drain, maybe energetically, maybe financially, maybe in terms of inhibiting your freedom to do as you wish, a relationship like that may need to be reviewed. But also Mercury, the planet of communication, not at its best in Pisces, it has to be said, is squaring up to Jupiter in a very ebullient part of your chart. And that's saying to you in a way, keep believing, keep the faith. Jupiter's about faith, even if you do encounter some obstacles even this week, because Jupiter also forges an absolutely adorable link to Venus. So the two planets of fortune in traditional astrology are aligning by the end of this week in an almost perfect way. And there could be a conversation, a connection, a sparkling encounter, even a flirtatious one that really does elevate your spirits. But I think it's around the basic foundations of your world you can start to see progress if you've really applied yourself and gone with the flow on some things that have just naturally made way in your situation over the last few years. So Pisces, your week commencing the 17th of February forecast sees the sun return to your sign on Tuesday for the first time in 11 months. And this really can be very elevating to your mood and mode. If you have gone through a period of introspection or lower vitality, or just feeling a bit washed out, or lacking motivation, or feeling very sensitive, the arrival of Mercury last week and now the sun really puts you much more back in the box seat. And that determination to get a firmer grip on your life direction does give you some real opportunities this week. Not least that Saturn forges such a dynamic link with Mars. Mars may have been in its retrograde since early this year in your 5th house, which in itself may have presented some opportunities, but they may not have all gone exactly to plan, particularly around your social or romantic situation. But now they align perfectly. So if there is an idea that's been percolating in the back of your mind that you've been keen to get on the front foot with, now you can gain the traction. But also, the fact that Mercury is linking in a square with your traditional ruler of Jupiter is interesting. Maybe something around where you live has needed some attention, and because of Jupiter's retrograde, but also because of its square to Saturn in your sign, you haven't perhaps had quite the extra dimension in terms of the fortune you may have wanted around home, family or emotional issues, not since last July, but that can suddenly start to ease too. The key with Jupiter and Mercury is not to believe it's done until it truly is. But your financial stars are looking good as well, with Venus still in your 2nd house. And Venus actually links brilliantly to Jupiter. So something to do with a property matter, or maybe personal finances can revive. There is a quarter moon on Thursday, however, and that just says to you, now you're really determined to take a firmer control on what you're doing. Just be aware that there may still be someone that you need to deal with who has certain expectations for you, possibly a boss, maybe a big organisation, someone in a position of seniority, perhaps even a parent, and you may still need to negotiate their input as this week goes on. But if you are a natural bohemian, you're going to feel so much more in your natural energy. And if you're someone who's just been waiting for the year to really take shape, after all that soul searching, now you can be much more on the front foot.